welcome back to episode 4 with the Dowagers. We're so happy to have you, and I'm Sharon Smith.
And I'm Cynthia Schrock, and we're just so happy to be with you guys today. So Sharon and myself, in our own Cynthia and Sharon style, had something completely, totally different planned for today, but we ended up really feeling in our hearts God was just really changing our hearts as to doing something different. And so today, the title of this one is going to be Why We Call Ourselves the Dowagers. That's probably something like to all of you, like it was to me, like, what in the world is a dowager? I mean, even when I heard the word for the first time, it was really weird. And so when I shared it with Sharon, be completely honest. When I shared with you, tell me what you thought.
I was like, well, I've never heard that word before. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Talk to me about this. Yeah, I was definitely going to be against it. Let's just say that until you told me your story.
So I love that about Sharon so much. You are just so precious that way. You know, she doesn't come right out and be like, Cynthia, that's the dumbest thing ever. She's like, so tell me about that. You know, she wants to hear the story. She's so sweet. And she's just so precious that way. So when you see that on here, that's who she truly is. So anyway, it wasn't too long ago that I was able to share that with you. I mean, I think it was just a short time ago when you said, "Tell me once again where this name, the Dowagers, came from."
Right.
And
Yeah.
so we decided, since we're naming ourselves that, we probably should tell you all, you know, what we think, why we name ourselves the Dowagers. So the name came from a dream that I had after my husband passed away. I was really struggling with the word widow. And I think we all kind of do struggle with that word, Sharon. I think that you and I have talked about that a lot. It's a word that has such a stigma with it and such a stereotype with it. And I was really struggling with it. And so one night I had a dream, and I'm a dreamer, and God gives me dreams, and I like to take those dreams and ask him what the interpretation of it is, but this one was just plain and simple. So in the dream, I was asleep and I was in a banqueting hall, and all of a sudden this hand came down from heaven, and it actually wrote on a wall, and it reminded me of the story in the Bible where the hand of God came and wrote on the wall. And he wrote on the wall, "You are the dowager." And I woke up. Now, let me tell you, I didn't know what it meant either. That was the strangest word to me. I'm like, why is that? What is that even? So that morning, I took some time to pray about it. And as I was praying about it, I decided to look up the word, what is a dowager? And when I looked it up, I literally just started crying because, and I'm going to cry again, probably because it's a widow of a king of royalty. And in that moment, God spoke to me and he said, "You are not a widow. You are a widow of the king. You are now a dowager." And I thought, wow, if other widows could just grasp who we no longer have our husbands, but we have something that replaced that. And that is Jesus is now our husband. He is now the one that we can run to. We are now widows of the King of Kings. And if we think about it, our husbands are actually kings now in the kingdom of God. You know, when you look at it that way.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
And so we truly are dowagers. We are widows of the kings who are our husbands and the true King of Kings, who is Jesus. And so through all of that, I started realizing that there are more widows out there who really need to realize that being a widow is not uh, a death sentence. Uh, Help me out here, Sharon. Do you think that's a word or not a
Just it just
not a
comes
stigma?
across so yes, it's so oh, it's like you're downgraded, that you're It's dark. It doesn't have bright, shiny flowers, and it doesn't have a good feeling about it.
Right.
I in the beginning, I couldn't even say the word widow. I just couldn't. I just couldn't
Right.
even. It still kind of gets me, right in the throat. I'm like, oh gosh. But I think you're onto something because we're more than that.
We are more than that. We are so much more than that. I think about there's so many verses in the Bible too that talk about that God takes care of the widows. He wants us to fight for the rights of widows and orphans. He wants us, widow Zarephath, he provided for her abundantly the flour and the oil that she was going to make one cake and go in, and her and her son were going to die. And then she sent along the prophet, I think it was Elijah or Elisha, that multiplied her provision. He's also a provider. And I think if we as widows, sharing with other widows on this podcast, if they could get a grasp of who they now are, it's a new identity. And instead of identifying ourselves as a widow, we identify ourselves as a dowager, a widow of the King of Kings. Because if there's one thing Sharon and I have agreed on, and that is that we are not going to allow ourselves to not have joy in this journey.
Yep.
And we've had to fight it. Not saying that we haven't cried. I've cried many tears.
Oh,
I know you've cried, many tears. But at the same point in time, we have to find God's providence and his hand in this. I was just sharing with my daughter this morning how that probably hurts my heart than anything. Sharon and I are a part of a group called the COVID-19 Widows for Justice. We're also a part of a group called the Former Feds Group. And in there, you see some women that they can't get past. They want to live in the bitterness and the depth of despair. God does not want us to stay there. He wants us to rise above that. Share that story that you shared about when soon after Jeff passed away, about that you were talking about being
Yep.
faithful.
Okay. Well, I'm going to a couple things. First of all, a widow is mentioned 81 times in the Bible.
Oh, wow.
81 times. I looked it up because, and I had done that a while ago since this all happened. And I thought, holy cow. And there are also,
God.
yeah, right. And there's also, stories about, just like you were just talking about, the widows in the Bible. And in my research of all this, I came across this book, and it's called Not Alone, 11 Inspiring Stories of Courageous Widows from the Bible.
Oh.
And my purpose for buying this book was, well, of course, I wanted to hear all about these, but my other purpose for buying that book was I wanted to start a group of almost like a book reading group or whatever, but on this book for those of us that have lost our spouse.
Yeah.
Because it just hit me, and I'm like, see, that made it take a different turn, right? Because now we're not just widows, and it's like that, just how I explained it before, kind of like a downgraded and all. No, it, at the end of the day, God has plans for us, right?
Yes.
So we need to think about that as a whole. And then back to the Dowagers, your dream. When you told me, I was like, I don't know about this, and then I looked it up and I read many times, and I kept researching it. But when you said that God wrote it on the wall, I'm like, well, who am I to question that? So I'm like, that's when I said, that's what it is. And I'm not going to question it, because those are the kind of messages that we get, because you and I, and I'm sure there are many other,
so true.
right, widows and, that are on this call that get messages, and we have to be obedient to those things. We have to, it's not in your head, because when you believe, right? So back to the, your question with the story. So I was sometime into this, maybe even a year, into my journey with this, and in my devotions, and reading, the Bible, somewhere in that one day it said, you need to be thankful
Mm,
for what happened.
wow.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm fairly certain I was sitting outside in the morning like I do, watching the sunrise, come up, and going through my devotions. And I thought, I screamed, I yelled, I cried, and I'm like, are you kidding me, God? Wait a minute. Be thankful for this? You have pushed it to the limit, and I can't. And I kept going through this. And then once I calmed down somewhat, I went, wait a minute. Let's think about this, Sharon. This is not about you. It's not about you,
Mm,
right?
mm,
This was Jeff's journey. And
yeah.
we don't have, we're all going to go to heaven at some point, right? Um,
Right. Right.
and so who am I? Who am I to stop Jeff's journey? And do I like it how it happened? Absolutely not.
Mm,
But does, having him get killed in a car accident, having him drowned, have him be put, caught in a fire, suffer with cancer, a long, long,
right.
long time. Really? That's not for me to decide. That's not for
Right.
me to
Right.
decide, right? And so when I finally came to it and said, um, I am, I, I'm not thankful for how it happened or anything, but I'm thankful that Jeff got to finally reach his final destination in heaven. And again, it's
Yeah.
not about me. And that really opened up things for me with my healing. And I
Mm,
surrendered to that. And I try to be obedient and listen. And the more that I read and stay in the word, and I learn more and more, and it gives me peace. And if you can find that peace, and then and find joy in the journey, this is going to be, hmm, the journey is just going to be, it's just going to be better. And we have to work at it every day. It isn't like, oh, okay, one and done and you're good now. No, it isn't work like that. But um I know where Jeff is, and I'm anxious to get there. And like we said in the last session, we're just all walking each other home. So I think there's a lot to be just be said about that, and being,
you
and
know,
God has a
Sharon,
plan
just
for us. You just have to trust it. You just have to trust it. To surrender to that.
you just said it right there, was the trust. The trust that it took you to say thank you, God,
Hmm.
that Jeff finished his
He
journey.
did. Yeah.
Um, that just touches my heart, because that was the conversation my daughter and I were having today, is how many widows go through what we've been through. And we don't learn to surrender because we're so wanting to hold on to what we had. And I'm not saying we forget the memory of our husbands, because you and I, of all people, I mean, we talk about them all
All
the
the
time.
time.
Even when we're together, I talk about them with my kids. I talk about them when I'm with my friends. I'm like, oh, Eric this, and oh, Eric that, and oh, Eric this. I don't forget my husband. That's not what we're talking
No,
about here.
no.
But we're talking about a surrender of our own lives, because we're still stuck here.
Yes.
Ashley was 6 years old. My daughter was 6 years old. My mom passed away when Ashley was 6. My mom was only 56. She said something so significant. She said, that's not grandma in that casket.
Mhm.
That's just her costume.
Oh, yes.
And I thought, we're still stuck in these animated costumes here, and our husbands have finished their journey.
Yeah.
I go back to the dream I had 4 days before Eric passed, which we can maybe get into that in another podcast about that. But in that dream, his suitcase showed up, but he wasn't with his suitcase.
Mm.
And I didn't know at the time what that meant, but it meant that he had finished his journey here on earth. Because I opened the suitcase, and in my dream, I said, I can't believe I grabbed Daddy's suitcase from his last trip. And I even used those words.
Mm.
And then come to find out 4 days later was when he passed, having no clue that it was going to happen. But that is exactly what has happened to our husbands. They have finished their journey. Heaven is not a trip we take and return. Earth is the trip. So guess what? You and I are left behind, and we're left behind, yes, to pick up some messy pieces, but that doesn't mean our lives end. We still have a life to live, and God has still called us to a greater calling, to a higher calling, and we're going to continue to fulfill that. And you use the word surrender, and I can't say enough for that word. I mean, for me, it was surrendering, trusting God for provision. Eric was the sole provider of our home.
Yeah.
He was the sole income for our home. And we lost his mom and him in a 2-week time period, and they lived with us. And I thought, oh my word, I'm going to be homeless.
Yeah.
But I had to learn to say, okay, Jesus, you are my Jehovah Jireh, my provider. You are now my husband. Every morning I wake up and I tell the Lord, hey, you're my husband. And so when I got that message about you are the dowager, I thought more women who are widows need to know that they're the dowagers, that Jesus loves so much that he's going to provide for them.
Yes.
That he's going to be with them in their tears, that he's going to be with them with every decision. But their lives are by no means done.
No.
They still have a life to live, and they can pick up the pieces and live a full life, but it takes surrender.
Yep.
You know, it takes trusting in his providence just to watch him. Do you ever sit back and go, oh, I see how God worked there? Mm-hmm. You know, I don't think if we would do that, if all widows would do that, they would see his hand more. I think sometimes we try to force a square peg into a round hole. Instead of just letting God be God, we try to make things happen or do things. Social media is a big thing. And there's nothing wrong with putting memories on there. But when people start doing it where that becomes the sole place, especially as a widow, and yes. I think you'll agree with me on this, if yes. that becomes the sole place that they're finding their confirmations, they're finding their identity, that's where they're finding their fulfillment in life, it's going to fall flat very quick.
Yes, agreed.
And that's where we've got to have God as our focus. We've got to become dowagers. We've got to stand tall and become widows of the King. I saw a little girl today. Her T-shirt said, walk like you're wearing your invisible crown. And I thought, by cracky, I need to get that.
I like that.
I mean, this was like a 5-year-old girl. And I thought, I need one of those. I need a T-shirt that says, walk like I'm wearing an invisible crown, because I am. And I thought, wow, as dowagers, we should almost have T-shirts made up now for we're the dowagers walking like we're wearing an invisible crown, you know?
There you go.
Well, because our husbands have received their crown, we're waiting on ours.
Yeah. Right.
And we're still here, and we're going to journey this journey good, and we're going to do it together. Yeah. And we're going to do it trusting in his providence and allowing him to be our identity and not just us being our own identity, or Facebook being our identity, or Twitter, or any of the social media platforms being our identity.
Yeah. And like you said, it's okay to share, sometimes to put something out there, or share something, share a memory. I mean, for me, when I talk about Job, or when others, when he's part of everything. I feel he surrounds me at all
Yes.
times. He's
Yes.
not, I just can't see him, but I know he's with me. And
Yes.
so yes, I'll put things on Facebook. I'll share things like that, but I'm not. I'm not looking. I'm not looking. I've even posted that sometimes when I post something. I'm not looking for you to validate or anything for me. I'm trying to help you. And
Yes.
it's interesting because I've had a number of people either, write me a message, tell me to my face, or however they communicated it with me, that it's like, gosh, you're such an inspiration. You for what you're going through, and you're still standing up, but you're still sharing things. And gosh, that inspires me. And I thought, wow. I mean, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying. I'm trying to help. So maybe I am trying to inspire you, but I don't go
Believers,
because to inspire you.
but
But
as
that's
believers in
from.
Jesus, isn't that what we're supposed to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know from, in the very beginning, after maybe a couple months, maybe, so many of my friends told me, like, you're gonna do something with this. You're gonna help people, and they're like, and they'd say, well, maybe you're gonna teach a grief share group. Maybe you're gonna, have a presentation at your church or whatever, but you're going to do something with this. And I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. Like, first of all, I just need to survive, right? But the more
It's
people that
great.
continually told me that, and then I felt like I was getting that message, and I know very shortly after Jeff died, somebody called me and told me that somebody that we knew mutually, her husband had suddenly died. I didn't waste a minute. I threw my jacket on and I went to her house, and I was waiting for her when she came home from dropping someone off at the airport. And I said, "Oh my gosh." And she didn't know that Jeff had died, because she was caught, because this is all kind of happening at the same time,
Wow.
and because it was so close together. And but it, Jesus picked me up and said, "Go."
Yes.
You're go there. And just by sitting with her and talking with her, and her mother-in-law, and it felt so good to be able to help them. Um and then that's kind of when things started to come to me, that, well, maybe you are going to do something with this. But I can tell you one thing. When Jeff was sick, the one thing he and I talked about, um, was when he was going to come home, we were going to share our testimony. And our
Mm,
testimony was going to be, I'm going to share my faith. How did my faith get me through this, with what was going on with you, not being able to see you, not be able to help you, physically. Um, and you're going to share, what was it like to be going through this by yourself without me being there to help you. And then what you can't remember, I'll fill in the blanks. And so we're going to share our testimony. And we talked about this. Said, I don't know. We said, we don't know if it's going to be on a big stage, if it's going to be across a kitchen table, um, one person at a time. I don't know that, but I know we're going to be sharing this. So I now look at this as we still are doing this.
yes.
Still
Yes.
are doing this. I'm I'm going to be our voice. And I know Jeff's right behind me. I know he's guiding me through this, but I'm still going to do this. And I'm
Yeah.
going to share our testimony. And who knew at the time that my faith would grow tremendously through
Wow.
this,
Wow.
because that's all I had.
That is. Yeah. Yeah.
So, like you said, someone in grief share once said, "Well, God is your husband." And I looked at him like they had four heads. I'm like, I have a husband. But, so I'm like, and so as this went on, I got it.
And then I come along and go, every morning I say, good morning, Jesus. You're my husband. What you gonna do for me today?
And I think of God as more my father
Yes.
than my husband, because who who loves their children more than God? He
Father.
loves
So
each
true.
and
Yeah.
every, yes, and our fathers, yes, each and every one of us. So he's got us.
He does. He does
Just
have. And I
surrender
think about
to us.
Romans 8:28. You talked about everything working for our good, and that's that verse in Romans 8:28. That all things work together for good.
Yes.
You know, for those who love God and who are the called according to His purpose. And we have to understand it's not our purpose; it's His purpose, and that's where that surrender comes in, and that's where that providence comes in, and that's where that seeing His hand move and just trusting Him. Sometimes that means even laying aside things and going, you know what, God, I don't know what's going to happen with this, but I'm just going to trust you with it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that we need to share some things about our podcast because, first off, we are fulfilling things that, like you said, you're fulfilling what you and Jeff talked about. I know Eric and I had talked about this. We're having a chance when he gets home. We're going to share with people, the goodness of God and what He did, but that's not going to stop because He's not here.
Right.
I will always share the goodness of God in my life because He has been so, so good.
Yes.
So one of the good things I want to share is we now have a YouTube channel that you can watch our videos on, our podcast on. Our little producer girl, Ashley, is helping us figure out how to get us on Apple. We're already on Spotify, so make sure and listen to us on those platforms. But if you get a chance to share our stories and our podcast with others, because I really believe that what Sharon and I have to bring is not just for widows, it's also for others, because guess what? You are going to be, and as much as people don't want to hear this, you're going to be on one end of this or on the other end of this. You're either going to be the one going or the one staying behind. And so that's one reason why we'd like to share this with other people, because I think then you can share with others that go through it, even if you don't experience it right away. At some point in time, you will, and we just ask you to share it with others. So I think that was great. So I hope you know what a dowager is now. Sharon and I are dowagers. We are widows of the King, and we are going to choose joy in this journey amidst our grief and amidst our sadness. We're still going to find purpose in our lives. We're going to find the purpose, but we're going to choose to find all things working together for good according to His purpose.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at with this. So join us next time on the Dowagers when we're going to talk about how to help people navigate through widowhood and things that you can do on the front end of that. And we'll be with you in about 2 weeks. Our podcasts come out every 2 weeks, approximately. Depends on how we're all doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye.